If this isn't my wife, then who did I kiss this morning?
I was 42 years old, a man who thought he had constructed a solid, predictable life. 16 years of marriage bound me to Marissa, the woman I once believed I would grow old beside. We had a daughter, Lila, 19 then, just beginning her tentative steps into adulthood. To the casual observer, we might have seemed ordinary, another suburban family with a mortgage, routines, and the steady rhythm of middle age. But that Saturday would teach me how thin the skin of ordinary really is, and how quickly it can be torn away. It was a humid afternoon, heavy with the smell of motor oil and cut grass. I was deep in my garage, arms buried inside the hood of my beloved '98 Camaro, an endless project that served both as therapy and escape. Sweat streaked down my back, and I was cursing at a rusted bolt when I heard the sharp, deliberate knock at the front door. I wiped my hands with a rag, irritated, already rehearsing the brusque words I'd throw at whichever salesman had the bad luck to bother me. Instead, it was Officer Jackson. The man looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like he'd rather be standing anywhere else on earth. His uniform was pressed, his badge gleaming in the sunlight, but his face carried the kind of dread you only see on people forced to deliver bad news. "Sir, are you David Mercer?" His voice was formal, low, as though afraid neighbors might overhear. "I'm afraid I have some very difficult news. Your wife, Marissa, was involved in a fatal accident roughly an hour ago." For a moment, I simply stared. Then, absurdly, I laughed, not out of joy, God no, but out of the sheer impossibility of what he'd just said. The words clashed so violently with my reality, they seemed almost comedic. "That's nonsense. She's upstairs right now, sleeping. She had a headache." The flicker of confusion on his face should have been the first alarm bell. A smarter man would have paused, examined that expression, and realized something terrible had already taken root in the foundation of his life. But I was determined to prove him wrong. "Come with me," I said briskly, leading him through the house and up the carpeted stairs. "Marissa, honey," I called, my voice buoyed with misplaced confidence. "There's someone here who thinks you're dead." The bedroom was dim, curtains tightly drawn, shadows stretching across the familiar furniture. The outline under the covers was unmistakable, a human form lying still, blonde hair spilling onto the pillow like it always did. Relief and vindication surged inside me. "See? She's right there. One very alive wife." But the moment I flicked on the lamp, the world split open. Jackson's hand flew instinctively to the grip of his firearm. His voice dropped into a command. "Step back, sir, now! That isn't a person." At first, I didn't understand. My mind refused to catch up. But then, the shape resolved, and horror clawed through me. It wasn't Marissa, it wasn't anyone. It was a mannequin, a department store dummy, clothed in Marissa's favorite pajamas, a cheap plastic hand adorned with her wedding ring. Her bracelet, the one I had given her last Christmas, fastened tightly around its wrist. Small diamond studs, her daily earrings, gleamed under the light. The detail was deranged. The beauty mark painted on its left shoulder, the faint scar on its wrist from the Thanksgiving she'd nearly set the kitchen ablaze in 2018. The craftsmanship was so grotesquely precise it made me nauseous. For nearly half a minute, I had been utterly fooled. My mind had wanted to believe. I had been prepared to laugh at Jackson's blunder, to see Marissa peek out from the blankets and roll her eyes at the ridiculous mix-up. Instead, I was staring at an abomination that mocked everything I thought I knew. Jackson, meanwhile, was no longer uncertain. He regarded me with sharp suspicion, as though weighing whether I might end up featured in the next true crime documentary. His tone hardened. "Mr. Mercer, I need you to walk me through your day. When was the last time you saw your actual wife?" That should have been easy. Married couples cross paths constantly. But my brain stuttered, hitting blank spots like potholes on a dark road. "This morning," I said finally. "Around 10:30, she kissed me before I started on the car. Said she had a headache and was going to rest." But even as I spoke, something felt wrong. That kiss hadn't been warm or playful. It had been cold, mechanical, like a rehearsed gesture. And I remembered now she was clutching her phone as though it contained state secrets. The truth was, Marissa had been strange for months. Phone calls that ended the moment I entered a room, designer clothes that didn't fit our strained budget, a laptop newly locked behind passwords, too many girls' nights. I had dismissed it all, choosing to believe she was planning some elaborate surprise for our anniversary. I told myself stories because the alternative felt unthinkable. By the end of the day, the crime scene unit had transformed my home into something alien. Cameras flashing, evidence bags multiplying, my sanctuary reduced to a crime scene. I was exiled to a sterile Holiday Inn for 3 days, eating greasy cartons of takeout Chinese, watching television anchors dissect my humiliation under headlines like, "Mysterious Mannequin Case Baffles Police." I watched strangers debate my life like it was sport. That was when I called my brother Daniel, the private investigator. He'd been warning me for years that I was suffocating in suburban mediocrity. I had ignored him, resented his cynicism, but now I needed him. He arrived with a manila folder that felt heavier than stone. Inside was the end of everything I thought I knew. The first photograph alone destroyed me. Marissa, leaving the downtown Marriott, her hand curled possessively around the arm of Julian Hart. Julian, my business partner, my supposed best friend. The rest was worse. Images of Marissa meeting Lucas Kane, a life transition specialist who specialized in helping people vanish into new identities. Evidence of her with a woman adept at laundering money through invisible channels. And the cruelest betrayal of all, proof that she had been documenting every corner of my professional and personal life for months. Insurance policies, bank statements, contracts. She had even photographed the safe combination I had stupidly written down. Daniel's voice was steady, merciless. "This isn't just about an affair, this is about annihilating you." The plan was monstrous in its simplicity. Marissa would die in a crash on Route 116. Lucas would collect her fake body while I drowned in grief. New identities, new passports, and a ticket to Costa Rica, where Julian had already prepared offshore accounts swollen with my money. I was to be left penniless, a widower in name only, clutching sympathy casseroles. Daniel gave me the options: hand everything to the police, suffer through divorce proceedings, lose half my assets, and watch my business rot under scandal, or take the darker road. Fight back. I didn't hesitate. I chose war. What they had designed was brilliant, but also fragile. It depended on me being the trusting fool I had been for 16 years. They had counted on good, predictable David Mercer, the man who never questioned, never fought back. What they hadn't realized was that beneath my suburban facade, I had teeth. And when cornered, even the most docile man can bite hard enough to draw crimson. First, I needed a body in that wreck, someone who could convincingly die in Marissa's place. Riley Ward came to mind immediately. Former military, scarred by tours overseas, now running a small security contracting business I'd once helped her launch. Riley owed me, and more importantly, she had the kind of flexible morality you can't buy. When I explained the plan, she smirked, leaned back in her chair, and said, "You want me to fake my own passing? That's the most insane favor anyone's ever asked. I'm in." With Riley preparing her big performance, I turned to renovations. My basement had always been my territory. Marissa avoided it, calling it creepy. That made it perfect. I rebuilt the place into something resembling a hidden apartment. A small bathroom, a simple bed, a flat screen mounted on the wall, even a few comforts to keep her calm. But the key addition was professional soundproofing. Down there, no one would hear her, no matter how much she screamed. Think of it as a private bed and breakfast. Except I decided when checkout came. The real stroke of genius was turning Lucas Kane. He liked to think of himself as untouchable, but tax problems had him in the crosshairs of federal investigators. A few well-placed calls, and suddenly Kane was eager to hear about alternative employment. His loyalties shifted faster than I expected once I laid cash on the table. "The crash is scheduled for this Saturday," he told me in the corner booth of a truck stop diner, glancing nervously at every face that passed. "Your wife and Julian want to move early, Route 116. I collect her 5 miles past the scene, then it's new passports in Costa Rica." "Not anymore," I said, sliding the envelope across to him. "Here's what actually happens." Saturday came overcast, perfect weather for tragedy. At 2:47 p.m., the call arrived. Officer Jackson, delivering the official news that my wife had died in a fiery wreck. I played the part to perfection. Desperate husband demanding answers, pleading to see the body, breaking down when told the remains were too damaged for identification. Riley's work was flawless. Meanwhile, Kane was retrieving a very different package. Instead of a conscious Marissa eager to vanish, he found her sedated and limp, thanks to Riley's pharmaceutical expertise. By the time she opened her eyes again, she was already installed in the underground suite beneath the house she thought she'd left forever. The irony was perfect. Marissa had wanted to erase herself, to disappear and be reborn. She got exactly what she asked for. Officially dead to the world, she now lived in a soundproof 10x12 room directly under my feet. Julian, meanwhile, was unraveling. From my office, I watched the live feed of him pacing his apartment. Frantic phone calls to lawyers, accountants, anyone who might explain why the plan had collapsed. Not once did genuine concern for Marissa flicker across his face. To him, she was just an asset gone missing. When she finally woke around 6, the confusion in her eyes was priceless. She clearly expected a safe house or private jet, not the basement of her own home. I let her sit in that uncertainty before switching on the intercom. "Good evening, Marissa. I hope you slept well. You're exactly where you wanted to be, dead to the world, starting fresh. Congratulations, you got everything you asked for." On the screen in her room, I showed the news coverage of her passing, the crash footage, the solemn anchor, neighbors shaking their heads in sympathy. Then I flipped the feed to Julian, pacing like a caged animal, frantically dialing number after number. "Take a good look," I told her. "That's the man you chose over me. Watch how much he cares about your well-being." The truth hit Marissa like a series of physical blows, sharp and unrelenting. She finally saw it for what it was. Julian hadn't cherished her, hadn't chosen her out of love. He had used her emotions like ammunition, turned her into a weapon aimed at her own husband, and now that the weapon had misfired, he was already discarding her, cutting his losses without hesitation. But Julian's problems were just beginning. Within 24 hours, Daniel's actors appeared at our office, striding in with the authority of real agents. They flashed badges that looked authentic enough to fool anyone and started asking questions about Julian's financial irregularities, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. They left behind folders filled with convincing paperwork, even a subpoena stamped and signed in all the right places. The thing about guilty men is how quickly they trip over themselves to explain. Julian couldn't stop talking. He babbled excuses before anyone accused him, dressing up fraud as clerical errors and oversights. In trying to sound innocent, he came off as exactly the opposite. Then the twist landed. Our staged investigation uncovered genuine crimes. Julian had been siphoning money for months, quietly draining our business into offshore accounts. His frantic efforts to hide it only made things worse, breaking nearly every banking law in the book. What began as a trap suddenly became a real prosecution. By Wednesday morning, the sound of tires on asphalt turned every head toward the parking lot. 3 black SUVs rolled in, doors swinging open in practiced unison. This time the agents weren't actors. They carried real badges, real warrants, and the kind of grim expressions that come from years of dragging white-collar criminals out of offices. Julian panicked. Clutching a briefcase stuffed with cash and fake passports, he bolted clumsily for the door, moving with the grace of a panicked giraffe. He didn't make it 10 feet before they had him pinned and cuffed. The look on his face was priceless, pure terror laced with the dawning realization that his life was finished. "David, you have to help me," he shouted as they dragged him out. "This is all a mistake." One agent paused, studying me with professional detachment. "Sir, are you Mr. Mercer? We'll need to speak with you about your partnership with the defendant." "Of course," I replied evenly. "Whatever you need." I had no idea Julian was involved in anything illegal, which, strictly speaking, was true. I had known about the theft, but not his secret laundering scheme. By noon, Julian's downfall was leading every local broadcast. The charges carried a maximum of 25 years, and reporters hinted that prosecutors expected to uncover more. The cameras crowded the building like vultures around a carcass. That afternoon, I went downstairs to deliver the news. Marissa was exactly where I had left her, hunched in silence, eyes fixed on the blank monitor. "Have I got a treat for you?" I said, switching it on. "Today's feature, the complete destruction of your boyfriend's life." Her face didn't change as she watched reporters list charges and speculate about prison terms. "The best part," I told her, "is that he did this to himself. All I did was shine a light on what was already there." Then came the commentary. Agents explaining that suspects facing decades usually talked, offering up names to lighten their sentences. Marissa's eyes flickered. She knew Julian would hand her over in an instant, except legally, she was dead. To the government, she was both unreachable and the perfect scapegoat. "Looks like he's going to blame you for everything," I said. "Lucky for you, you're already a corpse. And corpses can't be prosecuted." For the first time since she'd been in the basement, Marissa looked straight at me. "Why do all this? You could have gone to the police from the beginning." "Because the police would have given you a platform," I said coldly. You'd have made excuses, painted yourself as the sufferer. This way you don't get to explain, you just get to watch it all burn. 2 weeks later, she finally broke. She asked for a meeting. When I opened the steel door, I barely recognized her. 2 weeks without sunlight or her polished routines had stripped away the armor. This was Marissa bare, trembling, her voice hoarse. "Why not just divorce me?" she whispered. "You could have taken half and walked away." "Because divorce would have been civilized," I answered. "And you weren't. You decided I was disposable, worth nothing but erasure. Now you know what that feels like." Her tears came hard and fast. "Then what do you want? What's the point?" "I want you to understand," I told her, "what it feels like when someone you trusted most takes your life apart piece by piece, to realize every moment was a performance, to live with the knowledge that you built your own ruin." I gave her a choice. Stay dead in my basement forever with comfortable accommodations, or accept a new identity far away and never contact our daughter again. The second option came with one mercy. Occasional photos and updates about Lila, but only if she disappeared completely and never tried reaching out. The choice wasn't really a choice. She wanted to see her daughter grow up, even just in pictures, even if Lila never knew she was alive. 3 months later, Clara Hayes walked into Murphy's Hardware in Whitefish, Montana, with a fabricated resume and story about starting over after a messy divorce. Frank Murphy gave her the job managing books and inventory without asking too many questions. Clara was everything Marissa had never been. Quiet, modest, grateful for simple work and a small apartment above the store. She wore thrift shop clothes, kept her hair in a plain ponytail, and lived unremarkably enough to avoid attention from anyone, especially federal investigators. Meanwhile, my actual life was going better than it had in years. Hart and Mercer became just Mercer Consulting after Julian's public downfall, and business was booming. Being the innocent sufferer of your partner's financial crimes makes you look trustworthy by comparison. The insurance payout for Marissa's passing was substantial, $250,000 going straight into Lila's trust fund. My daughter was thriving at college with the focused determination suggesting she'd inherited the best parts of both parents. Our Sunday phone calls became deeper and more meaningful than ever. I'd even started dating again, carefully but with possibility I hadn't felt in years. There was something liberating about being completely honest about who I was, instead of maintaining the fiction of a happy marriage that had been dead for longer than I'd cared to admit. The most satisfying part was my monthly ritual. Every fourth Saturday, I'd drive to a post office 50 miles away and mail photos to a P.O. box in Whitefish, Montana. Pictures of Lila at college events, volunteering at animal shelters, spring break with friends who clearly adored her. Never anything traceable, just proof that our daughter was thriving. 6 months in, Clara made a mistake. She searched for Lila Mercer on public computers at the Whitefish Library, probably hoping for news beyond my curated updates. The search lasted less than 5 minutes before she realized what she was doing, but it triggered alerts I'd set up. Within an hour, Clara's internet service was mysteriously discontinued due to routine maintenance issues that would take weeks to resolve. Her phone developed similar problems. The message was clear: stick to the agreement or lose even small mercies. She never tried searching again. 5 years passed. I was standing in State University's packed auditorium, watching Lila walk across the stage to receive her engineering degree. She'd graduated summa cum laude, landed a prestigious job in Seattle, and was moving in with a boyfriend I actually liked. During the ceremony, I spotted her in the back row. Older, thinner, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap, but unmistakably Clara Hayes. She'd broken the cardinal rule, left Montana to see the daughter she was supposed to be dead to forever. My first instinct was fear. What if she approached Lila? What if she destroyed our careful peace? I watched Clara watching our daughter, tears streaming down her face as she raised a disposable camera to take pictures, being careful not to use flash. This was probably her first time seeing Lila in person since faking her passing. The girl she was looking at was completely different from the college freshman she'd left behind. Mature, confident, successful. I could have had security remove her, could have made calls ensuring she never got this close again. But part of me understood why she was there. Despite everything, this was still her daughter, too. Watching your child graduate college was the kind of milestone that made people do desperate things, so I made a surprising choice. I let her have this moment. When the ceremony ended and crowds dispersed, Clara moved toward the exit. As she passed my row, our eyes met across 20 feet and 5 years of complicated history. For a moment, we stared at each other like ghosts meeting in a graveyard. I could have destroyed her new life as completely as she'd once tried to destroy mine. Instead, I did something that felt like both forgiveness and final revenge. I nodded. Just once, barely perceptible, but enough to acknowledge I'd seen her and chosen not to act. The shock and gratitude on her face was worth more than any punishment. She understood that nod meant I was still in control, still making the rules, but choosing mercy over justice. She mouthed, "Thank you," before disappearing into the crowd. 20 minutes later, I was taking family photos with Lila and her boyfriend Mark. Lila was glowing, talking about her future plans. "I wish Mom could have been here. She would have been so proud." "She would have," I agreed, meaning it without bitterness for the first time in 5 years. "She loved you more than anything." "I feel her with me sometimes," Lila said, "like she's still watching over me somehow." If only she knew how literally true that was. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. Just, "Thank you." I deleted it immediately, but found myself smiling as I erased the evidence. Justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was understanding that everyone pays for their choices. Clara would live the rest of her life in exile, waking up every morning surrounded by strangers, going to sleep knowing her daughter was growing up without her. That was punishment enough, and allowing her one stolen moment to see what she'd preserved through sacrifice wasn't weakness. It was proof I was the one deciding what justice looked like. 5 years after Marissa tried to erase me from existence, I was successful, respected, surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was. My daughter was thriving, my business booming, my future brighter than ever. Meanwhile, the woman who'd tried to destroy me was living under an assumed name in a town where nobody knew her history. Getting by on minimum wage and whatever mercy I chose to show, I'd won completely, totally, permanently. And she knew it too. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is simply living well while your enemies live with consequences of their choices. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance. After 5 years of careful orchestration, the scales had finally settled exactly where they belonged.